Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we're in the shop today, and today will be another Corvette video, and we have a ton of stuff to go over. I'll just show you what we've knocked out. You guys can see almost all of our punch list is done. We've just got a couple things left on here to do, but yes, we've got a lot of updates. And first is, well, it's starting to look like a car again. You guys can see there's some body panels on there. So let's cut to that now. And so yeah, it's starting to look like a car again. We got the front bumper back on the car. You can see we have the driver's side fender. That's the first time that's been on there in a really long time. Yes, we still have the passenger fender off, and that will basically remain off until we wrap up everything with the stock ECU and the Haltech ECU. In case we got to rewire anything, we want to keep that off until we're done. And you'll also notice we have the fender liner back here. That is fully installed. You guys will remember we installed the SKG fabrication vent on the passenger side. Well, we've done that here on the driver's side. So that vent is in there. And then up here, we got all of the coolers and everything back up in place. You guys will remember when we installed the Kong intake a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure when that video was. But when we installed this aftermarket carbon fiber intake, we had to replace this panel here, you know, this plastic shroud. Well, with that plastic shroud, when that had to come out, we had to take all the coolers off and everything out of the front to get that aligned back up. So coolers are back in, everything's hooked up, everything's plumbed, everything's pretty much ready to go for the 2650 and the 427. And speaking of the 427, I was just at the machine shop today, so we'll drop you some pictures here. You guys can see we have the engine block still being machined. Ken is basically cutting out the other set of sleeves. He was in the middle of that today. And then here you also see we have that brand new K-Tech oil pump that is for the LS7 and for the LS9. So that oil pump is actually brand new. It's all 100% billet except for maybe the gears. Those might be just an aftermarket steel. But Chevrolet canceled and discontinued the OEM pumps for both the LS7 and the LS9. So the only route to go now is basically a brand new pump from K-Tech, and it is quite pricey. That's, if you guys look it up, go ahead. You'll be shocked at how much those are. And now we can actually talk about wiring and electronics. You guys will remember in the previous videos, I still had to finish up the Haltech wiring. Actually, that's over here. Haltech wiring up the ground signal and power for the sensors, the fuel pump, as well as cleanup and loom. Well, haven't done the loom, but I crossed it off anyway. And you guys can see right here, my hand's in front of all the wires that we've modified. Basically, we've got our two wires out to the fuel pumps. We've got our inputs and outputs on the sensors. So, you know, our fuel pressure sensor, our E85 flex fuel sensor, the coolant pressure sensor, and I think 3 or 4. There's 3 or 4 of those, so we had to wire those up. And I finished that last night. Now, when you're doing the modifications to that harness, don't be afraid to ask dumb questions, because I had a couple to Sean. And the reason I asked that is because you could really screw up the wiring when you start doing this stuff. But basically, you guys will see I've got 2 options here. I've got a cut and tuck, and then T. You guys can see that circle T. That is how you want to wire some of the wires. So the power and ground for any of the 5-volt or the ground wires that have to go through the ECU, you're going to want to tee all of those wiring into the Haltech wiring. You're not going to want to cut it and tuck the harness, because Sean basically said the car will not run if you cut that and don't continue that wiring harness. So you're going to want to use a T on those. So all the signal sensors, so basically fuel pressure, E85, as well as the coolant pressure, you're going to want to cut and tuck. And what I mean by that is you literally take this wire, cut it in half, tuck the other half. You guys can see one of them here. You can just see what I did is I looped the wire back and then I basically taped it shut. That way, the signal that's coming in from the ECU is only the signal coming from that sensor. So, and also same thing for the fuel pressure. You guys can see this thick wire here. Basically the same thing. You're going to cut and tuck that wire as well. The other half of the wire, loop it, tape it shut. You're good to go. So, the other thing is, you have to be very careful with the pinouts. When I was trying to modify, this is connector C, the one in the middle here. I was looking at it from the front, so I unplugged it from the ECU and I was looking at it. I'm like, huh, these pins are not lining up. So I emailed the manufacturer of Boomslang about that, and they said, hey, look on the back side of that connector because you will see the pin numbers molded into the back of the connector. So if you guys look on the bottom here, you won't be able to see it because it's simply not big enough. But look on the bottom here where I'm pointing my finger to. That is where the molded numbers are. Yeah, I didn't see that. I hadn't cut anything, but I'd wasted an entire night marking everything that we need to modify. And I ended up having to redo that because I was off on the pins and everything. So, yeah, had a couple dumb questions to Boomslang and Sean, but they all answered them very nicely, and they set me straight. So, yeah, so the wiring for the Haltech is now 100% done. The other wiring that we talked about was the ABS harness that plugs into the EBCM. Well, kind of like I'd mentioned, the junkyard that sent me the harness, they had broken that plastic connector all to hell. So I had to go ahead and replace that. Found a replacement on eBay. The manufacturer just sent me 2 more pins on that, and I was able to find a new, basically brand new connector. I de-pinned the factory one and put them all into this new connector. Yeah, that is another on here. It's the ABS. Yep, ABS module replaced plastic connector. So that's another one that's done. Actually, I just saw one I can cross off, the driver fender. I didn't have that marked off. The cotter pin for all ball joints and grease the ball joints. Yeah, I could do that. That's nothing big. I actually went to Harbor Freight and picked up both sets of pins that they sell. So you guys can see they've got their regular cotter pin, and then they have their extra long cotter pin. Each one of those was like $6. I don't know which one we're gonna need. The last item that's on this list is the VCIM swap and replace module then program. Well, that is our VCIM. Unfortunately, I can't do it on the lift. And I basically have to get the car off the lift, back it out, pull the seat out or back it all the way out, and then I can get up under the dash and try to get that VCIM out. Now, going back to the engine, I was talking with Ken today and trying to get a timeline of what he's thinking. Machining the rest of the block, I think he'll get that done this week. He has to do the bearings, he has to line hone everything, so that's going to take quite a while in machine work. As far as remaining parts, the camshaft has been ordered. Ken put together a cam package. I think it's got like 13 degrees of overlap, so it should be pretty rowdy. He's got that ordered. It is a spec cam from his cam manufacturer, so it's already on the shelf. It's already been made, and pretty sure he said it's already been shipped. So camshaft, that was the big worry I had in the previous video, that it might take 8 to 12 weeks. That is already taken care of, I'm pretty sure. The last 2 items were the crank and rods. Those were the last 2 things that he had to order. And those, I think, have shipped as well. So Ken actually will be receiving the last of the big parts pretty much this week or next week. So that puts us in the ballpark that we might be able to make this event in June. So we've got like 10 weeks left, something like that. And I did discuss it with Ken. I said, so how long do you think this will take? Well, unfortunately, Ken has 2 more engines to get done before mine, and it's going to be close, guys. It might come down to the last minute, and if I get the motor like 2 weeks prior to the event, I probably can at least get a street tune, and I can get the engine dyno tune. We could at least work with that. And then if we have to go to the event and basically do a test and tune, I'm totally fine with that. We could do data logs, grab the data, email it to Sean if he's willing to do that. That might be something that we do. I don't mind, kind of doing a test and tune at an event. I know it's kind of a waste of money, but where else are you going to have a chance to run a half mile and get as much data as you can? So that might actually be the perfect thing to do. So hopefully with roughly 10 weeks left, you know, we'll have enough time to get the motor, you know, on the engine dyno, get that dynoed. And we're not going to be pushing the motor on the dyno at all. We're basically going to be breaking it in. We do the 93 tunes, basically. And then I don't think we're going to be doing anything with E85 because I won't have a sensor with me and I don't have the Rebel LS wired for it. We could butcher up that harness, but honestly, it's just not worth it to me. I basically just want to go ahead, get the car dyno tuned, and call it a day. Now, with that being said, I'm actually going to be sending an email over to Sean to see if I can take this Nexus R3 ECU, plug in the Rebel LS harness, and then run that on the dyno. I think that would save us some time. And what I mean by that is, you know, Sean will basically get the fueling, everything done for 93 on this ECU. It'll have it saved in there. Now, the wiring inputs and outputs, obviously that'll be a little different because once it's in the car, we'll have the E85 sensor, the coolant pressure sensor, all those other stuff that we've added, and the Rebel LS basically doesn't have that stuff. So I think we could save some time by having that base map in there. He goes in, makes the configuration changes, and then I think we could start doing some street tuning in the car. And like I said, basically driving around town, I record a log file, send it to him. All right, guys, you'll notice the car is no longer on the lift. That is because I have already gone ahead and pushed the car outside. You'll see a couple of pictures here about that. And what we did was basically start working on the interior. I got the driver's seat fully attached. That's all plugged in. It's working just fine now. Passenger side, it's always been plugged in. And the back bolts are in. I think the fronts are in as well. And another thing you'll see missing is actually the VCIM. The new one that we bought on eBay. I put that in yesterday. I was able to get basically up under the dash. I loosened one of the bolts that ties on that bracket. There's actually two bolts for that. Loosened one, and I was able to swing it back and forth, and eventually I was able to pop out the old VCIM. I transferred our new Bluetooth module, that little antenna, put the new one on there, and we got that plugged in. So that is in. The old one is actually sitting right there down on the floor. You guys can see that. So we got that swapped over. Got in the car last night, I turned it on, I gave it power, and I pressed the button, and usually you'd hear like the OnStar ready or, you know, whatever. All that it was doing was muting the radio. Now, there are two things that we are missing from the system, and they're both on the inside of the car on the windshield. One is the Bluetooth antenna that goes right here. We don't have that. The second is the mirror, the rear view mirror. That's the 2005 stock one. The 2006 and newer one might be required for that swap. I just don't know. And the only thing that's preventing me from ordering that mirror is that those mirrors go for like almost $400. And honestly, at this point, I just want to get the car running, the OnStar, the Bluetooth, all that stuff. That's not a priority, and $400 for a mirror is a little ridiculous. And then the next item is going to be the PCV hoses for the dry sump tank. I know I'd mentioned in a previous video that that was a little weird setup. It's not. Basically, there is a port on the Extreme CFM catch can. You guys saw that previous video. We ran a 3/8 fuel hose, basically. You guys can see we have it zip tied to our wire harness here. We ran that into the front port of our C7 tank. Then the back port, basically all we did was we connected the lower tank. So this auxiliary tank, we connected that to the top tank here. And so you basically just have two lines. One goes from that auxiliary tank to the top, and then the second port goes from the other open port, then that goes over the catch can. So that's pretty simple. It's just those two lines. And we did get these fittings. I will have the part numbers for these down below. I did end up buying these on Amazon. I forget what the hose size is, but it is a very specific size. And you also will notice we have these seat shrink clamps from Gates. I did do the trick of using brake cleaner to take off all the white text. You guys will notice our old setup where the white text is on there. I've tried taking it off. It won't come off. So you got to take off that white font before you heat it up with a heat gun. So basically this is a 3/8 size. We'll have part numbers for that down below as well. And we basically ran our hose, plugged it in, put the heat clamp over it, and that is how we finished up those fittings. And someone said, let there be light. And as you just saw, we now have tail lights on the Corvette, and that is a huge update because I was always wondering how we were going to integrate the 2005 harness with the interior harness and the engine and trans harness out of that 2011 Corvette. And how we did that was we basically, you guys can see all these pins here. I didn't want to ruin this harness by cutting it up, so what I did was I went and picked up a throttle body adapter. It's an 8-pin throttle body adapter from Michigan Motorsports, and no, we're not sponsored. I just happen to have the sticker in my hand. And what we found out was basically that the 2011 interior harness that goes out into the chasm, the bumper, and then the tail light harness, that actually uses a throttle body. I just looked up the 8-pin Delphi or adaptive, whatever you want to call them, throttle body harness, and Michigan Motorsports had one. I think it was on Amazon for like 14 bucks, something like that. And so I ordered that, and I decided to take the car apart and take this harness apart, because this is the 2011 harness that we were telling you about. And it was built in 2022, so that's a little weird. But basically I found out that the pins that are on this harness and the pins that are on the 2005 harness, while they're very similar, they actually are different. They're shaped a little bit different, and they would not plug in to the plastic adapter, basically that 8-pin throttle body connector would not connect into that. So I did end up having to order that connector anyway. And also I didn't want to cut this one up just in case this, adapter wasn't going to work. So now I do have a spare tail light harness, and if we ever want to tear the car apart, we could replace that pigtail harness that we ordered and replace it with this one. And so how we got this working was basically cut all the pins off of the 2005 harness. I did it 1 pin at a time. You guys see some pictures here. And then I basically swapped over the Michigan Motorsports throttle body pigtail. I went pin for pin, and eventually we did all 7 lines, and that got everything working. So got that plugged in, we're good to go. The last wiring update we're going to have for this video is basically going to be a plug that will seal off the O2 connectors. And what I mean by that is the Haltech does not use any of the 4 O2 sensors that are on the car. It uses 2 widebands. We'll have a wideband on the collector and the driver's side header, and another wideband on the collector and the passenger side header. And then it'll interpolate all of that data with those 2 widebands. So what that means is we have 4 O2 plugs in here that basically are open. You could try to seal these, or you can do what I did, and I had an extra set of O2 extension harnesses. I got them a few years ago. Maybe I got them with a set of headers. I'm not 100% sure. But basically, I just depinned the wiring. I put in the 5 seals on this one, and it's going to be a white seal. I'm not really sure what the size of it is. I haven't Googled that yet. But basically, we're going to stick a white seal on the bottom of all of these plugs. So these are going to be, I think these are the front O2 sensors, and then the back O2 sensors are square shaped. And then we'll get another set of those white seals. We'll put them in here. And that will be a quick and easy way to go ahead and plug off 4 sets of wires that we're not going to be using. In our case, or most likely your case, you're just going to want to block off those plugs using the O2 sensor extensions, which a lot of people get with a set of headers. Just put a set of seals in there, plug it in, and you're good to go. So that's just a quick way to eliminate any water intrusion that could potentially get into the harness. Now, are we using those wires? No, but you never know. There could be a common ground buried in one of those 18 wires, and it could ground out to something else. So just to protect ourselves and to protect the rest of the harness, because like I said, I don't know if any of those 18 wires that are in those 2 looms would have a common ground with anything else. So just to prevent that, go ahead, plug them off like I showed you, deep-in the wires, put a seal in it, and cap it like we did here, and you'll be good to go. And so yeah, that is basically all the updates I have for you. I know we've covered a bunch in this video. You know, we've crossed out almost this entire punch list. There's a couple things left over, like we said, but I might actually have to create another punch list. And what that is, it's basically finalizing everything, you know, putting the interior back together, putting the shifter in, bleeding the clutch, bleeding the brakes, all that stuff, you know, all that fun stuff. So yeah, we'll just keep you guys updated as we go along. I think in the future I might have more videos where I'm talking less and try to have more time lapse, but you know, it is what it is. A lot of the stuff that we've covered in this video wasn't really worth time lapsing because it would be me deep-pinning a harness for an hour, and you wouldn't want to see that. So, but yeah, hopefully our timing works out. You know, Ken literally said between 1 and 2 months, and we have 10 weeks. So hopefully that all lines up, and we'll be able to make that race in June. And so yeah, I'm praying, crossing fingers, you know, hopefully everything works out. So that's gonna be it. If you guys want to follow along with this crazy Corvette adventure, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. If you guys want to help support the channel, check out all the links down below. Should be able to give you links for some of the project updates we've gone over today. And also make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. We've got a whole ton of used C6 Corvette parts on there. And we got stickers, hats, t-shirts, all that good stuff. And that'll be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.